In the heart of our quaint suburban neighborhood, life thrived under the watchful eye of the Homeowners Association, HOA. The charming houses, lined with manicured lawns and flowering gardens, stood testament to a community that cared for its appearance. Yet beneath this idyllic facade simmered tensions, especially surrounding the rules enforced by the HOA. They often prioritized regulations over relationships, imposing strict guidelines designed to uphold property values but stifling the very essence of neighborly camaraderie. Among our diverse residents lived Mrs. Thompson, my elderly upstairs neighbor. Her apartment was filled with memories, a legacy of laughter and warmth from generations past. Despite her frail appearance and mobility challenges, she radiated kindness and often shared homemade cookies. To me, she was not just a neighbor, she was family. As I gazed out my window one day, a gust of wind rattled the trees, foreshadowing an unexpected turn of events. Little did I know that in just moments our quiet community would be engulfed in chaos. It was an ordinary evening when her urgent screams pierced through tranquility and catapulted me into action, a desperate call for assistance as smoke began to snake through the air. What unfolded next would shake the foundation of our neighborhood and redefine my understanding of duty and sacrifice against a backdrop of bureaucratic indifference. Mrs. Thompson was a fixture of our building, her presence woven into the fabric of our lives. At 78, she was a delightful mix of wisdom and warmth, her laughter echoing through the hallways as she shared stories from a bygone era. Though frail and moving slowly with the help of her cane, she maintained a fierce independence that inspired those around her. Her apartment, filled with photographs and mementos, reflected decades of love and memories, each item telling a story that brought light into her life. Our connection deepened over shared moments. I often found myself stopping by for tea or to help her with groceries. She had an uncanny ability to ease my worries with her gentle smile and homemade cookies, which seemed to carry the essence of comfort itself. In an increasingly isolated world, she reminded me of the importance of human connection. However, beneath her resilient spirit lay a stark vulnerability. The challenges of aging had begun to weigh heavily upon her. Simple tasks became daunting obstacles, leaving her reliant on others for support. As I watched her navigate life with grace despite these hurdles, I felt an unspoken responsibility to protect her. It was this bond that ignited my determination when I heard her desperate screams that evening, propelling me toward action in a moment where time felt both fleeting and precious. It was an ordinary evening when the tranquility shattered. I had just settled down with a book when the acrid scent of smoke infiltrated my senses, drawing my attention to the faint sound of alarms in the distance. My heart raced as I turned toward Mrs. Thompson's apartment, and that's when I heard it, her terrified screams cutting through the night, desperate and full of panic. I rushed to the window, peering out to see thick tendrils of black smoke curling from her unit, rising ominously against the fading daylight. Within moments, chaos erupted. Neighbors spilled into the streets, confusion mingling with fear. The blare of sirens grew louder as fire trucks approached, but instead of relief, dread washed over me as I watched them slow to a halt at the curb. The fire department struggled to navigate their path through a crowd gathered by the HOA representatives, who waved their arms wildly and shouted orders that made no sense in this dire context. "Unauthorized property access," they yelled. "What about roof damage liability?" As panic escalated among residents who clung to each other for comfort, my thoughts were solely on Mrs. Thompson, alone and trapped inside. Time felt distorted, stretching endlessly as I weighed my options against the backdrop of chaos unfolding before me. Each passing moment heightened my urgency. She needed me now more than ever. With a deep breath, I made my decision. I would scale the roof to reach her, heedless of the dangers lurking below. The sound of Mrs. Thompson's cries ignited an instinct deep within me, a fierce urgency to help, overshadowing the fear that surged through my veins. I dashed towards my front door, heart pounding like a drum as I weighed the risks of my plan. Scaling the roof was far from safe. I could tumble and injure myself in a desperate attempt to reach her. Yet the image of her terrified face haunted my mind, a beacon guiding me through the haze of panic surrounding us. Glancing back at the scene below, my breath caught in my throat as I saw firefighters hesitating, trapped by the chaotic demands of HOA representatives who prioritized liability over life. The fire crackled ominously behind me, and time felt both fleeting and stretched, as if it were mocking our fragility. Every second counted. I couldn't let her wait any longer. Visualizing each carefully placed step, I took a moment to breathe deeply, steadying my resolve. The adrenaline coursed through me, fusing courage with desperation. With a quick calculation of the rooftop's edge complexity, I made my choice. I would climb up to confront this danger head-on. With every determined movement, I tried to dismiss the inherent risk. Mrs. Thompson needed me. That singular thought propelled me forward, overriding my inhibitions as I braced myself for what lay ahead in my frantic bid to save her from the flames. With determination coursing through my veins, I reached the edge of the building and began my ascent onto the roof. The rough texture of the shingles scraped against my palms, each movement requiring an effort that felt monumental against the backdrop of urgency. I could hear the crackling of flames growing more pronounced, a reminder of the danger lurking just below as I hoisted myself up. Every muscle in my body strained, but the thought of Mrs. Thompson trapped inside pushed me onward. As I climbed, I stole glances down at the staircase leading to her apartment, where thick plumes of smoke billowed upward, obscuring everything in a murky haze. It twisted and curled like a living creature, swirling with a malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. The sight was haunting. Each moment spent in hesitation felt like an eternity for her. I could only imagine how she must be feeling alone in that suffocating darkness. Reaching for a sturdy ledge, I pulled myself up, steadying my breath as adrenaline surged through me. The roof sloped sharply beneath my feet, and I fought to maintain balance while navigating this precarious situation. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, but I focused on one singular goal, reaching Mrs. Thompson before it was too late. Each labored breath reminded me of time slipping away, pushing me forward as fear and resolve intertwined within me. As I steadied myself on the roof, my heart raced not just from the climb, but from the clamor below. The sound of shouting cut through the crackle of flames, and curiosity pulled my attention downward. I caught sight of the HOA representatives, their faces a mixture of determination and disarray as they confronted the firefighters blocking their way. They waved their arms emphatically, shouting about property access and liability concerns while prioritizing policies over the urgent call for help that hung in the air. "Stop! You can't go any further," barked one of them, ignoring the guttural sounds of terror coming from Mrs. Thompson's apartment. "We need to address roof damage liabilities first." It was as if they were oblivious to the life-and-death struggle unfolding mere feet away from them. The firefighters exchanged frustrated glances, clearly torn between the urgency of their mission and the absurd demands being placed upon them. I could feel my stomach churn with anger as I witnessed this clash between human decency and rigid rules. Was protocol really more important than saving someone's life? Every moment spent scrambling and indecision multiplied Mrs. Thompson's chances of succumbing to smoke inhalation or worse. With each passing second weighed down by hesitation, I knew I had to push through. Their priorities could not dictate my actions. It was time to be resolute. I needed to get to her before the unthinkable happened. As I crouched on the roof, the realization struck me with agonizing clarity. Mrs. Thompson was trapped, immobile, and alone. The weight of her vulnerability hit me like a tidal wave, spiking my adrenaline but also igniting a deep sense of desperation. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, the urgency of her cries echoing in my mind while the bureaucratic chaos continued below. I could see the firefighters, frustration mounting as they battled not just the flames, but the absurdity of the HOA's demands. A knot tightened in my stomach as I imagined her gasping for air amidst the suffocating smoke. How could those standing by and shouting about property access fail to realize a life hung in the balance? It was as if their rigid adherence to rules rendered them incapable of empathy. I felt a surge of anger coursing through me. This was more than just a neighborly bond. It was a moral obligation to act. Despite my resolve to reach her, fear clawed at my mind. What if I couldn't get there in time? What if I fell while trying to navigate this precarious rooftop? That fear quickly transformed into sheer determination. I couldn't allow doubt to cripple my resolve any longer. With each pulse of desperation, I pushed aside these thoughts, narrowing my focus solely on Mrs. Thompson and the need to reach her, to pull her from the brink of despair before it was irrevocably too late. Amid the chaos, I recalled that I had set a drone camera to capture the scene, its small, unyielding lens silently recording everything below. I had initially thought it would provide a unique perspective on the neighborhood and its reaction to community events, never anticipating it would bear witness to such a tragic moment. As I maneuvered to peek over the edge of the roof, I could see the drone hovering nearby, capturing the frantic exchanges between the firefighters and the HOA representatives. Each whir of its propellers felt like a reminder of both accountability and urgency. The drone became an objective observer in a situation spiraling out of control, documenting not just the flames, but the absurdity of grown adults prioritizing property regulations over human life. As I watched it capture footage that would later unveil the full extent of their obstruction, a part of me felt empowered. This small device could hold people accountable for their actions. In that moment, amidst my rising anxiety to reach Mrs. Thompson, I realized that this drone could serve a greater purpose. It would tell our story. It would illuminate the reality of what transpired this night, a night where negligence and bureaucracy clashed tragically against an elderly woman's chance for survival. It was not merely about capturing video. It was about ensuring that, despite this chaos, the truth would emerge unfiltered and undeniable. As I prepared to make my move, the tension below escalated into a cacophony of shouts and confusion. I could hear the distinct voices of HOA members ringing out, their self-importance palpable as they argued with the firefighters. "You can't breach this property without authorization," one man insisted, his face flushed with indignation. "What if you damage the roof? We'll hold you liable." Frustration boiled within me as I listened to their misplaced priorities. The firefighters tried to reason with them, urgency etched on their faces, but each logical plea was met with bureaucratic resistance. "We have protocols to follow," another HOA member shouted, oblivious to the stakes at hand. Each moment that passed felt like an eternity for Mrs. Thompson, whose cries echoed louder in my mind. "Can't you see she needs help?" I wanted to scream down at them, but I held back, channeling my energy into climbing higher. My heart pounded as I watched this absurd standoff unfold. Their focus on liability and regulation seemed to blind them to the real danger. Mrs. Thompson's life was hanging by a thread. In that chaotic moment, it became painfully clear that miscommunication was crippling rescue efforts. While lives were at stake, they were more concerned about rules than the actual emergency unfolding before them. It fueled my resolve further. This was not just about reaching her. It was about defying the very system that threatened her survival. As I crouched on the roof, scanning the scene below through the drone's live feed, a chilling realization washed over me. Time was slipping away rapidly. Mrs. Thompson's cries echoed relentlessly in my mind, a stark reminder that each moment spent negotiating with the chaos below further endangered her life. The footage was capturing not only the absurdity of the HOA's obstruction, but also the bravery of the firefighters who remained resolute, desperately trying to navigate through the bureaucratic smoke screen preventing them from saving her. The contrast was staggering. The drone's lens captured the unfiltered reality of human negligence juxtaposed against selfless courage. In that instant, I understood the gravity of what I was witnessing, a tragic interplay of courage in the face of danger and a damning illustration of the consequences of misplaced priorities. The video would serve as irrefutable evidence, highlighting how systemic indifference could become life-threatening during a crisis. With adrenaline surging through my veins, I fought against the rising anxiety, knowing that every second counted. Each moment I spent documenting this disaster was a double-edged sword. It was vital to expose the truth, yet agonizingly slow in getting to Mrs. Thompson. I had to act quickly. This wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was about rescuing her, reclaiming agency amidst profound negligence, and ensuring that her cries for help would not go unanswered. Despite every ounce of determination propelling me forward, the moment I reached the edge of the roof and peered down into Mrs. Thompson's window, a chilling silence replaced her earlier cries. The smoke billowed violently from her apartment, dark and thick, and my heart sank as I realized that time had run out. The cacophony below faded from my awareness as despair constricted around my chest. I could hear the muffled sounds of firefighters still arguing with the HOA representatives, their urgency rendered futile by bureaucratic delays. I summoned all my courage and prepared to descend, but an overwhelming sense of hopelessness gripped me. As I clambered back down the roof slope, I knew that no amount of bravery or effort could reverse what had already happened. It was a devastating realization. Mrs. Thompson had been left to battle the flames alone while those entrusted with her safety remained entangled in discussions about property damage. In that moment, the weight of negligence hung heavily in the air. Lives were at stake, yet policies took precedence over action. The drone's camera continued to capture this tragedy unfolding below, becoming a silent witness to an avoidable loss. When the fire department finally breached her door with their tools, it was too late. Mrs. Thompson's life had been claimed by the very fear and hesitation that should have been addressed swiftly. My heart shattered for her. All I could do now was ensure that her story would not be silenced by indifference. In the aftermath of the fire, an oppressive silence enveloped my thoughts as I sat in my living room, the weight of grief and guilt pressing heavily on my chest. The drone footage played on a loop before me, each second a painful reminder of the chaos and obstruction that led to Mrs. Thompson's tragic fate. I watched helplessly as her pleas for help echoed through the video, a haunting soundtrack to the images of firefighters stymied by the HOA's insistence on adhering to irrelevant regulations. Each frame revealed not only the fire consuming her home, but also the relentless bureaucracy that hindered rescue efforts. My stomach twisted with anger as I saw how their focus on property liability overshadowed the urgency of saving a life. The footage captured heroism, a firefighter climbing up the stairwell, hand reaching toward the smoke-filled darkness, but it also starkly illustrated the negligence that allowed a community member to perish. I felt sickened by the knowledge that I had filmed this tragedy unfold, turning my anguish into a visual testament of wrongdoing. There was no escaping the reality that while I had aimed to document a neighborhood event, I instead captured a failure of duty and compassion. My heart shattered at the thought of Mrs. Thompson, her warmth and wisdom lost all because of an adherence to rules over humanity. I knew then that I had to share her story, not just to seek justice, but to honor her memory and prevent such negligence from happening again. With the weight of grief still heavy on my heart, I knew it was time to take the next step, initiating legal proceedings against the HOA. The decision was not made lightly. It felt as if I were preparing to battle a faceless entity that had played a role in Mrs. Thompson's death. The complexities of navigating a wrongful death claim loomed large, entwined with a whirlwind of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. I hired an attorney who specialized in such cases, and together we sifted through the drone footage that had documented every heartbreaking moment. Each frame revealed not just the chaos, but also the obstinacy of bureaucratic policies that prioritized liability over life. It was infuriating to relive those moments, yet I recognized their value. This footage held the potential to convey the truth in stark detail. As we prepared for court, I found myself grappling with conflicting feelings: anger at the HOA for their negligence, sorrow for Mrs. Thompson's lost life, and hope that justice could be served. My resolve hardened with each passing day. This wasn't merely about seeking compensation for an unimaginable loss. It was about accountability and ensuring no one else would endure a similar fate due to complacency and disregard for human life. The stakes felt monumental as I faced powerful opposition, but I clung to the belief that voicing my truth could help spark necessary change within our community. As the drone footage made headlines, public sentiment shifted dramatically, igniting outrage within the community. Neighbors who had once remained silent began to speak out, sharing their own experiences of the HOA's neglect and the chilling bureaucratic barriers that seemed to prioritize policy over people. As more witnesses came forward, their accounts painted a disturbing picture of an organization more concerned with its image than the safety of its residents. Social media buzzed with indignation as videos circulated, showing not only the tragic moments leading to Mrs. Thompson's death, but also the fervent pleas from concerned citizens who had witnessed firsthand the chaos that ensued. The community rallied together, demanding accountability and reform from the HOA, whose members now found themselves at the center of a growing storm of criticism. Town hall meetings filled with passionate residents calling for change became a regular occurrence. People voiced their frustrations, urging that new policies be implemented to ensure no one else would suffer in silence due to red tape and negligence. The sense of solidarity among neighbors grew stronger, fueled by collective grief and anger over a preventable tragedy. Amidst this wave of public outrage, I felt both empowered and anxious. Each testimony added weight to my resolve. Not only was this about seeking justice for Mrs. Thompson, but it was also about transforming our community into one that prioritized human life above rigid regulations. The movement was gaining momentum, and I knew we had to push forward together for real change. As the courtroom proceedings began, The atmosphere was charged with a mix of tension and anticipation. Each side presented its case, the attorneys for the HOA strenuously defending their actions while painting a picture of adherence to regulations, but the damning footage from the drone camera quickly shifted the narrative. The video played in vivid detail, capturing the frantic moments leading up to Mrs. Thompson's death and exposing the HOA's obstruction of the firefighters' efforts. Witness after witness took the stand, but it was the stark evidence from the drone that truly resonated. It illustrated how firefighters bravely tried to navigate a life-threatening situation while being held back by rules designed to protect property rather than lives. The footage showcased not only their courage, but also the chilling negligence of HOA members as they prioritized liability concerns over urgent action. The emotional weight in the room was palpable. Jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they absorbed the reality of what had transpired. I watched their reactions closely and felt a surge of hope that justice might finally be served. Each play of video revealed not just the chaos, but also how preventable this tragedy had been. My attorney pushed back against the HOA's claims, emphasizing that no policy could justify allowing someone to perish in a moment of crisis. It was becoming clear that accountability might hinge on this testimony, both of sorrow and resilience against systemic failures. As I listened, I felt driven by a newfound resolve, knowing this battle was about more than just compensation. It was a fight for recognition and change within our community. As the court delivered its ruling, a profound silence enveloped the courtroom before the floodgates of emotion opened. The judge found the HOA liable for their gross negligence, and a wave of relief washed over me, followed quickly by a realization of what this meant financially for the association. The ruling mandated significant compensation for Mrs. Thompson's family, along with hefty legal fees incurred during the trial. It was evident that the HOA's reserves would be utterly depleted, a consequence of their own actions. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere buzzed with a mixture of vindication and sympathy among community members. Many gathered to hear the verdict, their faces a reflection of both support and shared grief for Mrs. Thompson. As I shared her story with reporters, I felt a deep sense of validation. This was not just another lawsuit, but a powerful statement against systemic neglect. While the financial downfall of the HOA was bittersweet, it served as a crucial turning point for our community. With their funds drained and no longer able to operate effectively, residents began to discuss restructuring the HOA altogether, pushing for leadership changes that would prioritize safety over rigid regulations. The fight had not only brought us justice, but ignited a movement focused on creating a more compassionate and accountable community environment. As people shared their hopes for the future, I realized that in honoring Mrs. Thompson's memory, we were also paving new paths towards safer living, transforming sorrow into strength for collective change. In the wake of the court's ruling and the community's resurgence of hope, reflections on accountability within our neighborhood became increasingly poignant. The tragic loss of Mrs. Thompson illuminated the harsh realities of navigating bureaucracy, how rules, when misapplied, can lead to devastating consequences for individuals. It was a stark reminder that community organizations must prioritize human welfare over rigid regulations. As I spoke with neighbors in the days following the verdict, we shared stories of frustrations faced at the hands of the HOA's governance. Many recounted experiences where policies seemed to overshadow compassion, emphasizing a pressing need for reform. It dawned on us that accountability was not merely about punishing those responsible. It was about fostering a culture that values empathy and proactive measures over complacency. This journey had transformed my personal grief into a rallying cry for change, intertwining my story with that of others who felt unheard. The video footage served as a catalyst for our movement, urging us to confront our fears and demand better from those in positions of authority. As we organized community forums and discussions, there was a palpable sense of unity. We were no longer just individuals, but part of a collective effort to ensure that no one would again endure what Mrs. Thompson had faced. Ultimately, this chapter was about courage, finding the strength within ourselves and each other to challenge systemic failures, and advocating for a community that truly prioritizes safety and compassion above all else. In reflecting on this journey marked by tragedy and the pursuit of justice, several important lessons emerged about community responsibility and the critical need for accountability within organizations. The loss of Mrs. Thompson served as a catalyst for change, revealing how complacency and bureaucratic indifference can lead to devastating consequences. What began as a personal fight transformed into a collective effort to ensure that no one else would face similar neglect. Throughout this ordeal, I learned that courage comes not only from individual acts of heroism, but also from standing together as a community, voicing our shared concerns, and demanding the changes necessary for safety and compassion. The uproar that followed the release of the drone footage illustrated that when people unite against negligence, their voices can pierce through established barriers. Additionally, navigating the complexities of legal proceedings highlighted the importance of transparency and communication within community organizations. It became clear that policies designed to protect residents must prioritize their welfare first and foremost. Our experience taught us that vigilance is essential. Active participation in local governance can prevent tragedies before they occur. As we move forward, I am filled with hope that this tragedy will not be forgotten, but will serve as a reminder of our collective responsibility to protect one another. The commitment to fostering a culture of accountability and compassion will be essential in shaping a safer future for everyone in our neighborhood, one where stories like Mrs. Thompson's become relics of the past rather than echoes of neglect.